Hey, what's up everybody, Nexel here. Today we're playing Kingdom Hearts Union Cross and we're going to be talking about the buying traits for money update that was introduced with a version 4.1.0. Now we do have a list of stuff that we want to talk about, so we're going to talk about how to buy the trait with money, then we're going to talk about the resist traits just a little bit, we'll talk about why buying traits with money is so broken, and then finally I'm going to give you some advice and give you some general tips on what you should be trading. So first things first, how do we buy traits with money? So from the menu, you hit shop, and then from the shop tab, you're going to hit Moogle shop on the bottom, and then you make sure you're on the traits tab, and then finally at the bottom of the list, so the top of the list is all the VIP ones, the bottom of the list is going to give you the ones that you can buy with money. Now, what traits can you buy with money? You can buy ground enemy defense minus 60%, aerial enemy defense minus 60%, extra attack 40% power, strength plus 1,000, and then damage and rage 40%. Now, this means there are some traits we can't buy with money, but we'll get back to that in just a little bit. So how do you actually buy the trait? So you're going to select the trait you want to buy, and then you are going to select the medal that you want to put it on. Now, if a medal does not have any traits already or the list isn't full, selecting the medal and then hitting set trait will automatically have that trait show up in the first empty slot that's not there, and then you spend 5 million money. So each trait is going to be 5 million money. Now, if a medal has a fully set list of traits, what you're going to have to do is decide which trait you want to overwrite. So for example, let's say I wanted to erase this second damage and rage 40% for ground enemy defense minus 60%. I would just make sure the second trait is selected. I'd hit set trait, and then it would overwrite damage and rage 40% with ground enemy defense minus 60%. So that's how you buy the trait with money. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are the traits you can't buy with money. So aside from the new traits, which are like ground enemy defense minus 70% or extra attack 50% power, the big ones that you can't buy, or at least the ones that are missing, are going to be max gauges plus 2, max HP plus 800, defense plus 2000, and poison, sleep, and paralysis resist 20%. Now, I can't say that I care that we can't buy defense plus 2000 or max HP plus 800 because those traits are generally pretty irrelevant. I do think it's important we can't buy max gauges plus 2 because certain keyblades such as the reverse ones like Dark Gnaw or Missing Ache have a low gauge maximum, so it's important to bump up that with max gauges plus 2 in certain cases. It's not very frequent, but when you need it, you need it. I think it's actually important to address that you can't buy the resist traits, and the reason for that is because at very high levels of this game's difficulty, so for example like Gula in the Keyblade War, Nightmare Chirithi, or even some of the enemies from this past Organization 13 challenge, those enemies will hit you with status ailments consistently, and that can really hurt your setup if you're always hit for something like poison or you're always hit with something like paralysis, because that can generally make your setup really weak, or it'll knock you out twice. You're going to lose a second chance. So there's a lot of reasons you're going to want resist on certain medals and in certain quests, because those are going to be those high level quests where you can get potentially jewels, extra gems. You can get a lot of stuff from those high level quests, but in order to pass it, you're going to need some form of resist, whether you borrow it from a friend or you have a medal that's already stacked. So I think it's pretty important to say that if you can't buy the resist, there's no consistent way of beating those high level quests unless you can borrow a friend medal that is fully decked out with resist traits. Now let's talk about why it's so broken that you can buy traits with money, with the first one being that traits are necessary for being able to pass content above level 2500. Now 2500, I've said it in a lot of my previous videos, this is where enemies start to get very, very difficult. So for example, if we go to the Keyblade War event, all of these final bosses have level 5000. And at this point of the game, this is way above that level 2500 I was talking about. For these quests, if you don't have certain traits, you're going to be doing no damage. One of the basic mechanics of the game is that if your strength is not higher than the enemy's defense, you're going to be doing 1 damage every single hit. So traits like ground enemy defense minus 60% or aerial enemy defense minus 60% become very crucial for passing those enemies that are above level 2500. the traits are also necessary for being a very good raider. So for example, if I was in a heavy raid team, I would want to have several medals that have damage in raids plus 300%, or at minimum plus 200%. So buying these traits with money is really good because it allows you to fix yourself up very quickly for things like a high raid team or being able to pass really high levels of content like the Keyblade War. Now, another reason that the buying traits with money sale is so good is because you used to have to pay jewels in order to trait certain medals to perfection. So what do I mean by that? So my previous advice would be you have to go into the Moogle shop. Anytime you mercy a medal, you likely won't have enough traits to give it perfect traits. So the general set of perfect traits are full resist and extra attack with healed buffers, ground enemy defense, aerial enemy defense, extra attack sometimes, and strength plus 2000 on your core damaging medals, and then full raids on a raid setup. So it would take about 20 to 30 trait medals to get that perfect setup, meaning you would have to buy these extra trait packs about 2 or 3 additional times, which is essentially 2,000 or 3,000 extra jewels to perfectly trait a medal. Now what you could do is after you mercy a medal, after you do your trait rolls, let's just say you're missing a few here. You're missing a ground enemy defense minus 60%, or you're missing an extra attack 40%. You can just go into the Moogle shop, go into the trait section, and then spend 5 million money, and then boom, you're all set up. You can fix up a medal that didn't have perfect traits, and then just make it like it had perfect traits after your trait roll. And I used to say you don't have to chase after strength plus 1,000, but now you can just buy it for 5 million money, which is pretty sweet because being able to give a medal an additional 2,000 strength can go a long way with high levels of content. Another reason that buying traits with money is so broken is because money is actually an infinitely farmable resource. And there's, to my knowledge, I haven't really thought too much on it, but there's generally 2 very easy ways to get money. So the first one being just play the game, just pass content. Because whenever you go into any mission whatsoever, you build money. So if we just hop into this random quest, as you can see at the top, we have a money counter right there. So any quest, as long as you're defeating something, will give you at least 1 money. And I'm willing to bet there's a lot of quests, people haven't found it quite yet, that'll give you a lot of money very, very quickly if you run out of money at any one point. So that is one farmable way to get money. The next easy way, it's not farmable, but it's a very easy way and everyone uses it all the time, is if you just sell medals. Now this is important for certain banners where you pull a bunch of tier 3s or you pull a bunch of additional tier 7s you don't need. As you sell these medals, you're getting money. And that's really good because a lot of people have a lot of medals that they don't like keeping, so they just sell them. So now you can sell them, you can get money, and you could put that money towards trait medals, which is really, really good. Another reason that buying traits with money is so good is because it allows you to clean up a medal. So let's say, for example, we're looking at this illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku, and I did my trait rolls, and I still ended up with 1 max gauges plus 2. So I would much prefer a strength plus 1,000 over max gauges plus 2 on this medal. Now I can just spend 5 million money, and boom, perfect traits. Full decked list of perfect traits for a PvE damaging medal. I can get rid of it, and we are all set. So the buying traits with money is really good for cleaning up those additional medals. Let's just say you're building a raid medal, and then you end up with 4 damage in raids 40%, and then like a strength plus 1,000. You can now just replace that strength plus 1,000 with a damage in raids 40%. Again, very, very good deal in order to clean up those additional medals. Another reason it's so good to buy traits with money is because a lot of people sometimes pull into medals that they want to use, but they can't use it at high levels of content. Again, that level 2,500 plus, because there's not perfect traits. So for example, let's just say I randomly drew in to, let's pull up a medal here. Let's just say this Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora. I pulled into it randomly, pulling from the illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 deal, which a lot of people did, but it has no traits, and I have no trait medals to spend on this medal. So what I can do instead, I can just go into the Moogle shop, select all the traits that I want, and boom, 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 perfect list of traits on a medal that I got randomly. So this is really important for people who drew a lot of illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 medals but don't have the trait medals to max them out. Now you can just buy those traits, and it's a really, really sweet deal, making sure that everything that you bought gets the maximum amount of damage out of it, or you're getting the best investment out of any medal that you're able to get. So one last reason that buying traits with money is so broken, or at least one last reason I could think of, is that it allows you to play around with a metal's traits. So it used to be really expensive to do this because you'd have to keep trait rolling, you'd have to spend more jewels on jewel packs, but now you can do kind of creative things where, let's just say a metal becomes less relevant in the future because its damage isn't as good. There are metals with higher strength that come out. So for example, this illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi, or let's actually use the other one as an example. So this illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi, I have perfect PvE traits. So ground, aerial, extra attack. I even have the 2 strength plus 1000s. But in the future, as better metals come out, I'm going to want to use those metals, those new metals, for my damage and core metals. Then it's like, well, what do I do with this Kairi? Oh, I could just replace all of these with damage and raids, and then it's a perfect raid metal. So that's another reason buying traits with money is so good, because you can make something PvE at first, and then you could just replace it later down the line. So you can make a metal initially a raid metal, but it's like, maybe I want to use this for PvP now. So then you just erase all those damage and raids, and then give the strength plus 1000, give the ground enemy defense, the extra attack 40%. So you can essentially play around with traits, because now it's very cheap. Again, it's farmable to get money, and you don't really have to worry about the consequence. You don't have to worry about all the extra jewels you have to spend on trait packs. So that's another reason that buying traits with money is so good. And for example, another reason that buying traits with money is so good is because there are stopper traits for special traits. So remember that with every single day that passes, or if you're like a super whale, you can do it like 4 times a day, you can trait a metal with a special trait. And these special traits can be very, very broken. So you're going to go to your pet, you're going to hit train now, and then it opens up your training slots, and then you throw a metal in there, and then you give it a special trait. The reason buying traits with money is really broken is because sometimes you roll into stopper traits or special traits that you just don't want to replace. Now, generally, here's a list of all the traits that I think if you hit this as your special or your pet trait, you stop trait rolling it and you start rolling into the next one. So extra attack 120% power, damage and raids 100%, strength plus 2000, or any of the resist 100%. If you hit any of those special traits, you stop trait rolling that one and you move on to the next one. The reason behind it being that these are very, very rare. Each one I think has a 1% chance or lower, or essentially 1 every 100 metals is going to get that trait. And each one of these traits, to some extent, is going to help you a lot in your game. So the reason buying traits with money is so good is because sometimes you roll into these stopper special pet traits and you just don't want to replace them. So for example, this Kairi, I want to use it for damage right now, but I rolled damage and raids 100%. So it's like, oh man, I should really make this a raid metal now. Now it's very cheap for me to make it a raid metal, just spending 25 million money, and boom, I erase all of this and then just make it full raids. It's the same story with this Kairi, where I was trait rolling it, trying to get damage and raids 100% on this one, but instead I rolled strength plus 2000. It's like, no, now that I rolled strength plus 2000, I want to make it a PvE metal, now that it has more strength. Well, now I can just erase all of this and then just give it PvE perfect traits. So that's another reason why buying traits with money is so incredibly broken. Now, some advice that I have to give you before we close out this video: spend the money. Buy traits for metals that you think you might use. And the reason for this is that if we go to the shop and check out the Moogle shop down here, this cap for money did not change with the update. As of October 1st, 2020, the money cap is still 999,999,999. Now, this means that people who are still earning money, because again, you earn money from selling metals, doing quests, those people are still earning money, but they're at this cap. And what that means is that they are essentially wasting money that's not going to be kept, and that money could essentially be free traits. So not spending the money, having the maximum amount of money at all times, means that you're essentially wasting traits that could be used on a metal that could better your game. So again, a lot of people pulled from the illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 metals. They have a lot of Supernova Pluses, a lot of tier 10s that could really help their game out. So for example, Key Art 24. So instead of leaving this trait list and having the maximum amount of money, I could just spend an additional 10 million money, give this metal strength plus 1000 twice, and then still earn money with my quests, still earn money by selling metals from like the ticket draw and stuff like that, and then I'd still have this be perfectly traded. So what I'm trying to say is don't have the maximum amount of money at any point in time. There is likely a metal you will want to trade, whether you want to give it full raids or whether you want to make it good for PvE content, whether you're stuck on a mission where it's like you can only use tier 9s but you don't have any good tier 9s with traits. Just spend the money, get those traits, because there's no point in having the money cap. You might as well just give a metal good traits at that point. So make sure you spend the money, and as of right now, there's really nothing else you're spending money on except for leveling up a metal. So if you go to a metal, you want to level it up, remember that in order to do that, you have to spend money to level up that metal. So giving it chips and dales, maxing out the level, that costs money. So while I don't recommend being at the maximum amount of money, I also recommend not being at zero money, because you're still going to want to level up metals. New metals are going to come out. You're going to have to spend money to level them up. So be at this nice little sweet spot where you can spend a decent amount of money, but you also are not at the maximum. Because again, you're going to make money. You're going to make money by selling metals and doing quests. Another thing to talk about is, what do you want to trade? So what I like to do for when I decide which metals I want to trade, I go through almost every single one of my Keyblade setups, and then I do two things. I make a PvE one where I use it to take out really high level enemies, level 6,000, level 5,000 enemies, and that general Keyblade looks like ground enemy defense 60%, aerial enemy defense minus 60%, extra attack 40% power, and then a few strength plus 1,000 traits here and there. So for example, let's say I wanted to make a PvE setup, and I used to say this all the time, I got to do the math again, but 2 is the magic number for Renova, so we're generally going to want 2 Renova metals. And then let's just say I wanted to add this Aqua in here because she's one of my best damaging metals. Let's go ahead and just replace one of these Kyries. Let's make sure I replace the right one. Okay. And let's just say this is our best PvE setup. So since this is our best PvE setup, the next thing to add is traits. What traits do we need? So for example, this Aqua, beautiful traits, excellent traits. But let's say this Aqua has no traits, and some people ran into this when they pulled a random illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 medal. Now I'll be like, all right, well, I'm making this a PvE setup, so I want to have this Aqua with ground, aerial, extra attack, and 2 strength plus 1,000. I'll go into the Moogle shop, I'll spend 25 million money, and boom, perfect. And then that makes this setup a perfect PvE setup. The second setup that I think about doing is PvP. So sometimes, again, you run into metals that are really good, but you have no way to give them traits. So for example, just the other day, we pulled into Strikeform Sora from the Draw Points banner, but we had no traits to give it. Now I can be like, all right, what do we need for PvP? We need extra attack, we need ground enemy defense minus 60%, and then a bunch of strength traits, or even just extra attack and then a bunch of strength traits. Now I can just make that PvP setup, and if I know this metal is going to be in it, I just spend the 25 million money, make it a perfect PvP metal. So I'll do that for pretty much every single Keyblade and figure out what are my best setups, and then figure out what are the metals that I need to trade in order to make that the best setup possible. That takes a little bit of thinking, and for newer players or returning players, you might want to go into Discords and ask people questions to figure out what is like a really good setup nowadays, and then you'll figure out what metals you have to trade with the money for trade sale. But that is generally my list and advice on how to use the buying traits with money sale. So hopefully this was helpful, helping some people get back into the game or trying to figure out how to make setups to pass those really hard level enemies. Again, level 2,500 plus, you're going to need that ground enemy defense minus 60% or that aerial enemy defense minus 60%. So this is a great system. I'm super happy they included it because I have been saying that free-to-play players need a great way in order to trade their metals, and now it exists. So hopefully this video was helpful in teaching you how to use the money for trade sale and what things you should be doing and why it's so broken and why I think this is a great addition to the game. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below and I'd be happy to answer when I have the time. If you'd like to join my Discord, get some off-hours help, or post some of your Keyblades and ask which of these metals I should trade, definitely hop into my Discord. The link is right below the screen. Just type that into your URL and you should be good to go. But that's all for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, until next time, take it easy.